What if everything we thought we knew about Meghan Markle's royal exit was wrong? What if Megxit was just the beginning? Not the end of a royal chapter, but the opening move in a carefully calculated strategy to come back. Bigger, bolder, and with more power than anyone imagined. According to explosive new whispers from deep within the palace walls, Prince William has just discovered something that sent shockwaves through the monarchy. A secret plan, a multi-layered roadmap. A potential return, not just to royal life, but to the very center of it. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. A plan designed by Meghan Markle herself. And it's not just speculation anymore. It's reportedly real, documented, rumored, whispered about in hushed tones between aides and leaked to key members of the media. The British royal family, long known for its obsession with order, lineage, and protocol, may now be under threat not from foreign powers or internal scandal, but from a Hollywood-born outsider with a sharp mind, a stronger will, and a plan more audacious than anyone in the royal institution was prepared for. And Prince William? He's not amused. He's not calm. He's not diplomatic. He's livid. Sources say his reaction was unbelievable, a side of the future king that rarely emerges. Behind closed doors, he exploded, not just because of what Meghan intends to do, but because of how long she's allegedly been doing it right under their noses. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This isn't just about a dramatic headline. This is about power, position, prestige, and how far someone might go to reclaim what they believe was taken from them, or to climb to heights that even centuries of royal bloodlines might not be able to stop. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone smile at a loss, only to later turn it into their greatest advantage? Because that's the Meghan Markle story you're not being told. Until now, it began quietly, subtly, without fanfare. While the tabloids were chasing Harry's every misstep and royal biographers were dissecting Spare line by line, something else was happening. Something quieter, less flashy. Meghan had gone silent. No tell-all interviews. No explosive leaks. No Netflix Part 2. She stepped away from the spotlight. Or so it seemed. But in that silence, she was allegedly planning. Calculating. Waiting. She wasn't done with the royal family. Not even close. And now, according to palace insiders, Meghan's master plan has been slowly unfolding behind the scenes, with surgical precision. It starts with optics. Have you noticed? Meghan's image in the British press, once scorched beyond repair, is being softly rehabbed. There's less venom, more neutrality, a few cautiously positive headlines sprinkled in between the cynicism. Coincidence? Or the result of back-channel negotiations and carefully orchestrated goodwill campaigns? There's been a shift, not massive, but enough to raise eyebrows inside the palace. The Sussex brand, which once seemed destined for podcast parodies and influencer oblivion, has been pivoting. Toward what exactly? Re-entry. But not just re-entry into the British public's imagination. That would be too small. This is about re-entry into royal life itself, not as the estranged wife of a wandering prince, but as a royal player, a strategist, a potential heirmaker, or even something more. The whispers started as early as spring. A few unexpected calls, invitations, a charity project here, a subtle donation there. Meghan was back in touch with old contacts, one still embedded within the royal and aristocratic circles of London. But why? What could possibly draw her back to the very institution she publicly declared as racist, rigid, and emotionally repressive? The answer may shock you. According to one former courtier who allegedly spoke with a royal biographer, Meghan never intended to leave the power of the institution behind. She simply wanted to find a way to control it. And how do you do that? You wait for the right moment. The moment the monarchy is weakened by scandal, fatigue, illness, or transition. Then you re-emerge, not as the rebel, but as the savior. And right now, the monarchy is in flux. Charles's health has been the subject of increasing speculation. William is stretched thin. Kate is maintaining composure, but battling waves of unwanted attention. And Harry? Drifting further into the background. Perfect conditions for a return. But not just any return. A repackaged Meghan. Not the feuding duchess, but the peacemaker. The mother. The woman who just wants to heal the family, while also reminding everyone how forward-thinking, modern, and relatable she can be. A narrative that could, if executed correctly. Flip public opinion, both in the UK and abroad. And therein lies the most dangerous part. If Meghan can get even a fraction of the public back on her side, if she can be seen once again as royal, but different, modern, inclusive, she could carve out a powerful niche. One that William allegedly finds terrifying. Because the plan, according to multiple insiders, doesn't end with a smiling photo op or a return to Frogmore. It goes further. It's about influence. Inside the palace. In the Commonwealth. Among young voters. Among marginalized voices. And perhaps even, one day, among those who shape royal succession. Far-fetched? Not as far as you might think. Remember, there's precedent in royal history for outsiders to wield tremendous power behind the scenes. Think Wallis Simpson. Or more recently, Diana, whose legacy still shapes public opinion today. And Meghan knows how to command a global narrative. She's media savvy. She's connected. She understands America. She understands influence. She understands optics. And more importantly, according to new leaks, she understands exactly which levers to pull inside the royal machine. And that, perhaps, is why Prince William is so disturbed. Because it wasn't just the press Meghan had been reaching out to, or the public. It was royal insiders, staffers, courtiers, even, allegedly, a few key royals. One of them, someone extremely close to Prince William. Someone he trusted. Someone who may have been feeding Meghan real-time intel about the family's movements, media strategy, and internal discussions. A mole. And when William found out, he didn't handle it the way you might expect from a composed, future monarch. He didn't remain calm. He snapped. Private meetings were called. Phones were confiscated. Staff were rotated. Access was denied. The palace went into full lockdown mode. But it was already too late. Because the plan was already in motion. And what's most shocking? It's not just about Meghan's alleged plot. It's about how long she may have been working on it. Some sources believe this comeback strategy dates back to before the Oprah interview. That even then, Meghan had begun planting seeds, controlling narratives, building alliances, and preparing a contingency plan in case Hollywood didn't deliver the legacy she craved. In other words, while the world thought she was running from the crown, she may have been finding a way to circle back to it. And now, all eyes are on William. Because if Meghan does return in any official capacity, or even semi-official, what does that mean for the line of succession? For public trust? For the monarchy's future? And here's the real question. What if this isn't just a comeback story? What if it's a coup? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. How do you sneak back into a kingdom that once shut its gates on you? That's the question no one ever thought they'd ask about Meghan Markle. And yet, here we are. It didn't happen with fanfare. There were no official invitations. No televised interviews. No big, dramatic announcements. Just a series of subtle moves, quiet reconnections, and sudden reappearances in exactly the right places at exactly the right time. Meghan Markle's return to the British stage wasn't loud. It was deliberate. So ask yourself, why would someone who claimed she was relieved to leave the royal family behind suddenly begin orbiting it again? Because according to multiple sources close to royal insiders, Meghan didn't just want to come back, she planned it. And it started with a whisper campaign. Not public, not official, but effective. It began in places no one was paying attention to. Small events, local charity dinners, private Zoom calls hosted by UK-based nonprofits with ties to royal patronage. The kind of events that rarely make headlines, but always get noticed by the palace. A mental health charity in Surrey suddenly received a large anonymous donation. A children's literacy initiative in Manchester got a new American benefactor, one with connections to Sussex Global. And just like that, Meghan's name, once associated with scandal and drama, started floating back into polite British society, attached to generosity. Coincidence? Or chess? Because here's what makes it suspicious. None of these appearances were filmed. No PR team posted them on social media. No paparazzi tipped off. These weren't the moves of someone seeking the spotlight. They were the moves of someone building credibility. Quietly, strategically, patiently. But even more telling, the reemergence of an old ally. One name kept popping up around these quiet reintroductions, Princess Eugenie. Now let's pause here. Why would a senior royal, no matter how removed from the direct line of succession, Go anywhere near Meghan Markle after everything? Let's go back. Eugenie and Meghan have always shared a peculiar closeness. Long before Megxit, long before the Netflix deals and the book bombs, Eugenie was one of the few royals seen publicly enjoying Meghan's company. They attended events together, shared dinners, even went on double dates with Harry and Jack Brooksbank. But what raised eyebrows was what happened after the royal fallout. While the rest of the family closed ranks, Eugenie visited the Sussexes in California. More than once, she stayed at their Montecito estate, was photographed laughing with Harry at the Super Bowl, even introduced Meghan to several of her own contacts in the charity and fashion worlds. At the time, the palace brushed it off as harmless. A personal relationship, they said. But what if it wasn't just friendly? What if Eugenie was more than a sympathizer? What if she was Meghan's bridge back into the institution? The inside connection feeding her information, making introductions, gauging the temperature inside the royal circle? And here's the twist. Multiple sources say Meghan didn't initiate the contact with Eugenie. Eugenie reached out first. But why? Was it a private gesture of loyalty? Or something more politically motivated? Because not long after those quiet reconnections began, something else happened. A new PR firm in London started representing several causes close to Meghan's heart. Causes tied to mental health, women's education, and racial equality. The same firm had previously handled clients within the royal household. And now, they were representing events that, by sheer coincidence, began inviting Meghan Markle back into the UK conversation. Not as a duchess, not as an exile, but as a philanthropist, a speaker, a global voice. It was all subtle, purposeful, disguised under the cloak of noble causes. But make no mistake, this was re-entry, and someone was laying down the red carpet, quietly, but carefully. Let's talk timing. Because timing, in royal strategy, is everything. The Queen had passed. King Charles had just been crowned. The monarchy was vulnerable, emotionally exhausted, institutionally strained, and under increasing pressure to appear modern, relevant, and unified. In this vacuum, Meghan didn't burst through the gates. She slipped in. Using grief, using healing, using charity. She didn't knock on the front door of the palace. She walked through the servants' entrance. And it worked. Several British journalists began subtly softening their tone. A few once hostile columnists started using words like rehabilitation, regret, and even second chance. All at once, Meghan wasn't being spoken about with venom, but with possibility. And that's when things took a turn. Because William noticed. Sources say William, always wary of leaks and perception, began to notice a sudden shift in the tone of palace briefings. Someone, inside, was feeding pro-Meghan talking points to outside sources. But it wasn't coming from Clarence House. It wasn't coming from Harry. It was coming from within Kensington Palace itself. That's when William reportedly ordered a quiet internal audit. No press, no scandal, just a reshuffling of staff and closer monitoring of correspondence. And what he found wasn't just uncomfortable, it was alarming. Because according to whispers from two veteran royal correspondents, one of Meghan's former staffers had been quietly rehired by someone very, very close to Princess Beatrice. Coincidence? Or coordination? And remember, Beatrice and Eugenie may not be senior royals, but their access to family functions, events, and inner circle gossip remains unmatched. If Meghan was truly orchestrating a return, they'd be the perfect Trojan horses. But William wasn't going to let it slide. He began tightening his grip, cutting off access, limiting internal flow of information, even allegedly confronting Eugenie directly at a Windsor gathering. Sources say the exchange was heated, private, and ended with William storming out. Now let's zoom out for a second. All of this, the charity events, the strategic silence, the renewed friendships, wasn't just PR. It was part of what some royal insiders are now calling the re-entry strategy. A quiet, step-by-step plan to reinsert Meghan into British public life without officially being reabsorbed into the royal institution. Because here's the brilliance of it. If Meghan appeared too eager, the press would pounce. If she begged for forgiveness, she'd look weak. But if she appeared generous, peaceful, mature, and if others began inviting her back, then the narrative shifted. From exiled duchess to unwanted peacemaker. It wasn't about asking to come back. It was about making it look like the public wanted her back. That's how you control perception. That's how you flip a narrative. And it worked, until one person saw through it all. Prince William. And his response, as we'll see soon, wasn't just personal, it was strategic. Because the moment he discovered the next step in Meghan's plan, he didn't just push back. He went nuclear. But before that, something else happened. Something that sent a chill through royal corridors. Because Meghan's quiet return was about to get a global boost from a place no one expected. And the person who handed her that boost was sitting in the king's inner circle. What if the most underestimated royal was the most important one? That's the question Prince William reportedly asked behind closed doors when the pieces finally started lining up. Because once he looked past the headlines, past the noise, past the obvious players, one name kept resurfacing in every quiet corner of Meghan Markle's alleged return strategy. Princess Eugenie. Not a future queen. Not a working senior royal. Not someone the tabloids chase daily. Which is exactly why she mattered. And exactly why no one saw it coming. At first glance, Eugenie seems harmless in royal terms. Soft-spoken, fashion-forward, often sidelined in the hierarchy. A spare to the spare generation. Someone the palace never considered a threat. But here's the thing about underestimating people in royal history. It's usually a mistake. Because while Eugenie doesn't hold power on paper, she holds something far more dangerous inside the monarchy. Access without scrutiny. She moves freely. She attends private family gatherings. She has direct relationships with cousins, uncles, aides, and staff who would never speak openly to the press, but might talk casually over dinner. And crucially, she was one of the very few royals who never fully cut Meghan off, even when bridges burned, even when the Oprah interview detonated like a bomb, even when Harry's book scorched what was left. Eugenie stayed, quietly, politely, consistently, and that loyalty, intentional or not, may have made her the single most valuable asset in Meghan's entire long game. Let's rewind. When Meghan and Harry first left the UK, the family split into camps. Those who closed ranks around the institution and those who tried, awkwardly, to stay neutral. Eugenie chose neutrality. She didn't issue statements. She didn't condemn. She didn't defend publicly. But behind the scenes, she answered calls. She replied to messages. She visited. And that matters more than any headline ever could. Because in royal circles, silence isn't absence. It's positioning. Sources close to palace staff say Meghan never demanded access through Eugenie. She cultivated it. No pressure. No ultimatums. Just warmth. Concern. Shared grievances about how the media treats women in the royal family. Sound familiar? It was a language Eugenie understood deeply. And slowly, over months, maybe years, trust was reinforced. Not the explosive kind. The quiet kind. The kind where conversations drift from "how are the kids" to "you wouldn't believe what's going on behind the scenes." And that's when the Trojan horse entered the gates. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for the palace. Because if even half the whispers are true, Eugenie wasn't acting as a spy. She didn't need to. She was simply talking. Talking about how strained things felt. Talking about who was frustrated with whom. Talking about how exhausted William seemed. Talking about how Kate was holding everything together. Innocent observations. But in the hands of someone like Meghan, someone trained in media, messaging, and strategy, those observations become intelligence. And intelligence becomes leverage. Let me ask you something. If you knew exactly when your biggest adversary was vulnerable, wouldn't you act? According to insiders, Meghan's conversations with Eugenie followed a predictable arc. First, empathy. Then, understanding. Then, reflection. Then, possibility. What if things didn't have to be this way? What if healing was possible? What if the family needed a fresh start? All framed as concern. All framed as peace. But always moving in one direction. Back in. And then came the moment that reportedly set off alarm bells inside Kensington Palace. A private family gathering. No press. No cameras. Just royals being royals. At some point during the evening, Eugenie casually mentioned something she shouldn't have known. A detail about William's internal strategy. Something that hadn't been shared beyond a very tight circle. William noticed immediately. He didn't react. Not then. But later that night, he reportedly asked one of his senior aides a simple question. How many people know this? The answer? 4. And Eugenie wasn't supposed to be one of them. From that moment on, William's suspicion hardened into certainty. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't carelessness. This was a leak. Not malicious. Not paid. Not dramatic. But dangerous. Because leaks inside royal families don't need intention to cause damage. They only need access. And Eugenie had it. Now here's the contradiction that makes this story so compelling. By all accounts, Eugenie isn't a schemer. She's not a mastermind. She's not plotting coups in candlelit rooms. So how could she be part of something so calculated? Simple. She didn't know she was. That's the genius and the danger of the Trojan horse. You don't weaponize someone by turning them evil. You weaponize them by making them comfortable. Comfortable enough to talk. Comfortable enough to share. Comfortable enough to trust. And Meghan, according to those who've watched her closely, understands this better than anyone. But the gambit didn't stop at information. It extended into symbolism. Remember when Eugenie named Meghan as a godmother figure to her child? That wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. In royal culture, godparent roles are never accidental. They're declarations, signals, and Meghan's inclusion, after everything, sent a quiet but unmistakable message. She still belongs. And if she belongs here, maybe she always did. William reportedly saw this as a line crossed. Not because of jealousy, not because of ego, but because it blurred the boundaries between personal loyalty and institutional survival. And in William's mind, that's where the monarchy has always collapsed in the past. Private emotion overriding public duty. He'd seen it before. With Diana. With Charles. With Harry. And now, potentially, with Eugenie. So William acted. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But decisively. He began isolating. Reducing access. Limiting informal gatherings. Tightening the circle. And according to one palace source, he issued a quiet directive. No information flows beyond the immediate line. Which, translated from royal language, means this. Trust no one. Not even family. But here's the twist. While William was closing doors, Meghan was opening new ones. Because Eugenie was only the beginning. The Trojan horse had done its job. The gates were cracked. And what walked through next was far more dangerous than whispers. Because Meghan had now confirmed something critical. The palace wasn't united. The future king was isolated. And the family, despite all appearances, was fractured. Which meant one thing. The next phase of our plan could begin. And this time, she wouldn't be using family. She'd be using something far more powerful. The media. But what came next would make even Eugenie step back and leave William wondering just how far Meghan was willing to go. What's more powerful than a crown? A camera. That's the rule Meghan Markle knows better than anyone else. In the 21st century, power isn't just inherited, it's projected, controlled, managed, through lighting, editing, framing, script. And while Buckingham Palace had protocol, Meghan had something far more potent. A brand. One built not just on royalty, but on reinvention. And now, as whispers of her quiet return to royal proximity circled behind palace walls, Meghan was waging an entirely different war on screen. Not against the monarchy directly, but against the narrative that had defined her. Because if she couldn't change the past, she could rewrite the way the world remembered it. Here's the irony no one talks about. Meghan Markle was always one of the most media-savvy royals in history. She wasn't raised behind palace gates. She wasn't trained to keep her mouth shut. She didn't grow up fearing headlines. She pursued them. Hollywood taught her one golden rule. You control your own story, or someone else will. So when she and Harry left the royal family, it wasn't a retreat. It was a redirection. The Oprah interview? A blockbuster. The Spotify deal? A headline grabber, at first. The Netflix docuseries? An emotional bombshell. But beneath all of that was something more strategic. She wasn't just talking. She was testing. How far could she go? What would land? What would backfire? And most importantly, what kind of Meghan did the public want next? At first, she leaned in hard. Victimhood, racism, isolation. It resonated. For a time. But Hollywood is fickle. And sympathy has an expiration date. By late 2023, the winds had shifted. Spotify publicly cut ties. Netflix quietly shelved future projects. Archetypes wasn't renewed. And the media, especially in the US, started asking a dangerous question. What exactly are Harry and Meghan doing? That's when Meghan vanished. Not literally, but optically. No new photo shoots. No bold statements. No tell-all interviews. Silence. And in that silence, a new strategy was born. She didn't need to talk anymore. She needed to transform. From the misunderstood duchess to the reformed woman. From the exile to the philanthropist. From the victim to the visionary. Step 1. Clean house. Out went certain PR handlers. Out went overexposed brand tie-ins. Out went the tell-all tone. In came subtle messaging. In came hand-picked appearances. In came rebranding. Here's where things got really interesting. In early 2024, Meghan was spotted attending 2 private Hollywood dinners. Not premieres. Not red carpets. Private salons. Small guest lists. Executives. Power players. Female founders. Notably missing, Harry. Insiders say Meghan was laser-focused at those events. Not pitching shows. Not pushing drama. Networking. But not for content. For image rehab. The goal was clear: shift perception from royal gossip magnet to serious global female leader. And it worked. Suddenly, Meghan was being photographed attending panels on women's rights and entrepreneurship. She was spotted with philanthropists, not publicists. And she subtly aligned herself with figures like Melinda Gates, Amal Clooney, and even Michelle Obama, without ever name-dropping them. Then came the turning point. A charity gala in New York. Meghan arrived late. Quietly. No official title used. Dressed modestly. But the press coverage? Flattering. They didn't call her the exiled Duchess. They called her activist Meghan Markle. That's not a coincidence. That's narrative engineering. And it caught the attention of people back in London. Because here's the thing about royal image. It's not just about what's true. It's about what's believable. And suddenly, the idea of Meghan returning didn't seem outrageous. It seemed redemptive. Now, you may be wondering, why does this matter? Because in royal politics, perception is power. And Meghan wasn't just rebuilding hers. She was repositioning it. Not as a threat, as a solution. To an aging institution. To a fading Commonwealth relevance. To a royal family constantly accused of being out of touch. Imagine this narrative. Meghan, the outsider who challenged the system, returns with grace to help modernize the monarchy. That's not tabloid fodder. That's legacy. And Meghan knows it. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. The moment that shocked even her critics. The day Meghan refused to speak out. When the British press expected her to attack. It happened after the release of a scathing biography by a royal insider. The book painted Meghan as manipulative, cold, and even delusional. But instead of clapping back, Meghan said nothing. No statement. No lawsuit. No response. Why? Because silence speaks volumes. And this time, her silence wasn't avoidance. It was strategy. Let the press look petty. Let the author look obsessed. Let the public wonder if maybe, just maybe, Meghan had grown past the drama. That's how you win the long game. Now here's where it gets fascinating. As Meghan rebuilt her U.S. image, something strange started happening back in the U.K. Columnists, once her fiercest critics, began softening. A Daily Mail editorial pondered, has Meghan matured? A Sunday Times journalist mused, there's room for redemption. And the biggest twist? A former royal aide anonymously told a reporter, the monarchy might need Meghan more than it admits, especially with the younger generation. Let that sink in. The institution that pushed her out might now need her. William saw this shift, and he wasn't amused, because he understood exactly what was happening. Meghan wasn't just rehabilitating her image. She was repositioning her value. She was becoming useful again. To charities. To Commonwealth causes. To the image of a modern monarchy. And that made her dangerous. Because useful people are hard to dismiss. So William did what any strategist would do. He countered. In his own way. No public attacks. Just small moves. He ramped up his own image campaign. Focusing on family, duty, and tradition. He and Kate doubled down on working royal appearances. He reminded the public, through optics, that the monarchy doesn't need rebels. It needs stability. But privately, he was preparing for something more. Because Meghan's next move wouldn't come through charity, or press, or Hollywood. It would come through something far more calculated. A direct contact. With someone inside the royal family. Someone unexpected. And this time, it wouldn't be Eugenie. It would be the last person William thought Meghan would ever dare approach. Would Meghan dare reach out to the king? Alone? It sounds unthinkable. After the interviews, the memoirs, the relentless public battering, the global headlines calling the royal family racist, cold, and out of touch. How could she possibly make contact with the very symbol of that institution? And yet, behind closed doors, away from the headlines and the palace press office, there are whispers that she did exactly that. Not through Harry, not through official channels, not through lawyers or publishers or staffers, but directly, personally, strategically. And if true, this wasn't just a letter. It was a signal. Let's rewind the chessboard. By late 2024, Meghan Markle had done what no one thought she could: rebuild a narrative. No longer the tabloid villain, she'd pivoted into something softer. An advocate, a mother, a woman of purpose, quietly attending charity events, steering clear of drama, and aligning herself with the global elite of female thought leadership. But as her image inched back into favor, her real target remained unchanged. The British royal family, and not just any part of it. The top. So why Charles? Why now? Because Charles, unlike William, still holds one thing Meghan desperately wanted: legitimacy. Not as a duchess, not as Harry's wife, but as someone welcomed back, publicly, ceremonially, and officially, into the fold. And Charles is the only one who could make that happen without causing constitutional chaos. Here's where it gets fascinating. Despite the pain and public fallout, Meghan always shared a curious connection with Charles. Remember, it was Charles, not Doria, who walked her down the aisle when her own father didn't show up. In that moment, he became not just a stand-in, but a symbol of institutional acceptance. A bridge. And even after the Oprah interview scorched every royal relationship, there was always a strange silence around Charles. Meghan called out Kate. Harry lambasted William. They both spoke critically of palace systems and the firm. But Charles? Rarely mentioned, rarely condemned, often left vague. Was that by design? Some believe so. Because if you want to return to a system you once criticized, you leave the door open with the one person who can unlock it. The whispers began around a quiet spring weekend. Charles was recovering from a minor health scare, not serious, but enough to trigger concern among senior staff. During that weekend, insiders claimed the king received a handwritten letter. Not an email, not an official memo. A letter. From Meghan. What did it say? No one knows exactly. But according to a trusted source in the king's circle, it wasn't accusatory. It was warm, personal, and most shockingly, respectful. The letter allegedly acknowledged the difficult chapters. It spoke of lessons learned, of regret over certain misunderstandings, of hope for a future where healing might be possible for the sake of the next generation. But here's what made the message so potent. There was no ask, no request to return, no demand for titles, no attempt to negotiate. It was framed as an olive branch, a gesture of grace, a signal of maturity, and that alone sent the palace into a quiet panic. Because Meghan wasn't playing checkers anymore. She was playing chess. Charles, to his credit, did not overreact. He acknowledged the letter privately, reportedly told Camilla about it, and then did something few expected. He waited. No reply. No leaked headlines. No calls to Harry. Just silence. A test? Maybe. Because the royal family has always operated on restraint. But restraint, in this case, wasn't about dignity. It was about watching Meghan's next move. Would she weaponize the silence? Would she claim rejection? Would she publish the letter? She didn't. That was the most shocking move of all. For weeks afterward, insiders say Charles kept the letter in his personal study. Not discarded, not filed away, kept. And the mere existence of that letter rattled William. Because it suggested something he feared more than scandal. Forgiveness. Because forgiveness meant possibility. And possibility meant Meghan might return. Not officially. Not yet, but symbolically. And that was the beginning of a larger campaign. One Meghan didn't need Harry's help to pursue. She had her own connections now, her own strategy, and she was laying the groundwork for something even bolder. Because here's what no one expected. Meghan had stopped pushing against the monarchy. Now, she was positioning herself as someone who could strengthen it. Yes, really. Sources close to her new UK-based advisors say she began framing herself not as the forgotten duchess, but as the unifier. Someone who had endured the institution's growing pains and could now help modernize it from the outside. A voice for change, for global relevance, for multicultural appeal. And Charles, who's desperate to keep the monarchy relevant with younger generations, was reportedly intrigued. Not convinced, but watching. Then came the second contact. Less direct, more symbolic. It came in the form of a shared patronage event. A climate-focused initiative Meghan had quietly supported in the U.S. announced a surprise partnership with a Commonwealth charity under Charles's wider patronage umbrella. Coincidence? Maybe. But royal insiders say these types of partnerships are rarely random. They're tested behind the scenes. And this move? It sent a message. We can align, without conflict. And that, more than anything, caught the attention of senior royal aides. Because if Meghan could find alignment with the king's charitable priorities, without ruffling feathers, then she could slowly reframe herself not as a threat, but as a potential asset. And let's not forget, Charles has always been more flexible than William when it comes to optics. He survived the Diana scandal, the Camilla wars, the Netflix dramatizations. He understands that public perception is fluid, and some insiders believe he'd rather fold Meghan back into the narrative on his terms than risk her growing influence as an outsider. Because an outsider with global appeal is harder to control than an insider with agreed-upon boundaries. It's Royal Crisis Management 101. Better to have her on the bench than on the attack. Now here's where it gets murky. Because according to two separate sources in royal-adjacent media circles, Meghan's camp was preparing for a soft reintroduction. Not to the palace, to the public. It would start with a joint charity effort. A quiet nod from Charles. A shared appearance? Unlikely, but not impossible. A media-friendly campaign with overlapping branding? Very possible. And William? Absolutely furious. Because in his eyes, this wasn't strategy. It was surrender. And surrender wasn't an option. This is where the fracture between father and son reportedly deepened. Charles, ever the pragmatist, was willing to consider the long-term benefits of reconciliation. William, still reeling from the Netflix series, the memoir, and the whispered betrayals, saw only danger. And for good reason. Because the final stage of Meghan's rebrand was about to unfold. A move that would leverage everything she'd built: Hollywood influence, rehabilitated press, subtle royal contact, and push it straight into the public spotlight. But she wouldn't do it herself. She'd use someone else. Someone who'd never been seen as strategic. Someone with the perfect excuse to speak. A new voice was about to enter the arena, and what she revealed would rock the monarchy's internal world more than Meghan's letter ever could. When someone who once destroyed you sends a letter, do you open it? That was the question that reportedly haunted Princess Catherine when a pale blue envelope arrived at her private residence. No stamp, no royal seal, no official markings. Just a name written in familiar cursive, Meghan, delivered not through palace channels, but by hand. Through a quiet intermediary known only to Kate and one other person in the royal household. Why now? Why her? Why this way? Kate didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a letter. It was a move. A carefully timed, emotionally laced, masterfully crafted play. But was it a genuine apology or a trap meant to corner her in the public eye? Let's set the stage. By this point in the story, Meghan had already done the unthinkable. She'd reached out, directly, to King Charles. And while no official statement followed, the palace's reaction spoke volumes. No condemnation, no distance, no denial. The royal walls didn't slam shut. They paused. But where Charles had received a letter of olive branches and healing, Kate's was different. More personal, more loaded, more fragile, and far more dangerous. Because if Meghan wanted to shift the narrative inside the palace, she couldn't rely on strategy alone. She needed optics. And there was only one woman in the world who could deliver those optics with a single smile, a single handshake, a single appearance. Kate Middleton. For years, the press had painted them as opposites. Kate, regal, composed, a British rose. Meghan, bold, outsider, Hollywood firebrand. But underneath the surface, their dynamic was never simple. Behind closed doors, they clashed over bridesmaids' dresses, titles, protocol, and, if palace sources are to be believed, the hierarchy of royal femininity. It wasn't just about personalities. It was about position. Kate was always destined to be queen. Meghan, always adjacent, never central. And the resentment, however subtle, built over time, until it exploded. We all remember the infamous Oprah moment. The question was simple. Did you make Kate cry? Meghan's reply, calm and devastating, no. The reverse happened. And with that one sentence, years of royal image building cracked like glass. Suddenly, the world saw Kate not as the serene peacemaker, but as a potential aggressor. The press may have tried to spin it, but the damage was done. And for Kate, who had endured more than a decade of scrutiny, with hardly a public misstep, the betrayal was deep. She reportedly wept, refused to engage, closed the door permanently. Until now. So what changed? Why would Meghan reach out after so long? Why now? Because public sentiment was shifting. And the next stage of Meghan's rebrand required Kate's silence to break. Not with drama, but with forgiveness. Imagine the image. Kate and Meghan, side by side at a charity event. Two duchesses, one future queen, one royal outsider, smiling, working, healing. It would shatter the press cycle. It would dominate headlines. Trend on every social media platform. Be the final act of Meghan's redemption arc. But there was a catch. Kate. According to those closest to her, Kate was stunned when she received the letter. She hadn't spoken to Meghan since shortly after the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, where they stood awkwardly together outside Windsor Castle, their smiles as stiff as their gloved hands. But that was ceremony. This was personal. The letter, sources say, was 3 pages long. Handwritten. Deliberate. And it began with a bombshell line. I owe you an apology I should have made years ago. The first page, reportedly, was all about acknowledgement. Acknowledging the tension, the misunderstandings, the pressure, the cultural divide, and, most poignantly, the public fallout that placed 2 women against each other in a global arena. Meghan allegedly admitted that things were said, on both sides, that spiraled beyond what either of us wanted. She described being terrified during her final weeks in the UK, feeling cornered. But, crucially, she did not point fingers. She simply said, I was angry, I was scared, and I acted from that place. For that, I'm sorry. The second page? More nuanced. It wasn't just about emotion, it was about image. Meghan acknowledged the power Kate holds, not just in the monarchy, but in the hearts of the British people. She wrote, reportedly, you represent something bigger than any of us. And that's a weight I didn't understand until I left. There was a tone of reverence, even admiration, but also suggestion. Because on that second page, Meghan hinted at a possibility. The world is watching us both. What if we chose to show them something they don't expect? Not a plea, not a plan, but an idea, a seed. The third page? Ambiguous, less polished. It ended not with a demand, but a request. If you're willing, I would love to speak. Not as duchesses, not as future queens or former actresses. Just women, mothers, sisters-in-law. Then silence. No phone number, no schedule. Just an invitation to reply. And for Kate, that's where the real storm began. Because behind the palace walls, this was more than just a private correspondence. It was a trap. At least, that's how William saw it. According to insiders, when Kate showed him the letter, his reaction was immediate and visceral. Do not respond. Not because he doubted Kate's grace, but because he knew the media mechanics. A letter like this wasn't just personal. It was a potential narrative trigger. If Kate responded, even privately, it could be leaked, spun, turned into a front-page story of reconciliation, one Meghan could use to signal peace, even if nothing had truly changed. And if Kate didn't respond, Meghan could still claim moral high ground. She apologized. She tried. She was ignored. Either way, Meghan won the PR game. Unless Kate did something neither option accounted for. Neither a reply, nor a rejection, but something unseen. A counter-strategy. One that would allow her to retain grace, protect the institution, and still guard her personal integrity. Because make no mistake, Kate was no longer just a duchess. She was preparing to be queen. And queens don't get trapped. They move silently, precisely, and when necessary, decisively. And what Kate did next, according to palace sources, may have been the boldest move of her royal life. Because while Meghan played the game with emotion, Kate was about to play it with power. And the move she made wouldn't just affect Meghan, it would shatter the fragile calm between Charles and William. There are rules in the palace, and Meghan just broke all of them, again. That's what one royal insider allegedly whispered to a veteran reporter the night it happened. The night Prince William found out. Not about the letter. He already knew about that. Not about the outreach to Charles. He'd suspected that too. But this was different. This was the moment William realized Meghan Markle wasn't just making symbolic moves or waging a quiet PR comeback. She was executing a coordinated campaign, one that threatened not just his family, but his very future as king. And his response wasn't composed, wasn't diplomatic, wasn't royal. It was volcanic. Let's go back 72 hours before the detonation. Kate, always poised, always strategic, had chosen silence. She hadn't responded to Meghan's letter. She hadn't made a call. She hadn't told her staff. She'd told only one person, William. And William, being William, had taken a breath. Then two. He'd paced. He'd spoken to no one. Then finally, he told Kate what she already knew. She's trying to use you. Kate didn't disagree, but she also didn't fully agree. Because deep down, part of her wondered, what if Meghan was sincere? William didn't have that doubt. To him, sincerity didn't matter. Optics did. Because what happened next, just days after that letter landed on Kate's desk, confirmed William's worst fear. An exclusive story appeared in an American magazine with deep Sussex connections. Buried beneath a headline about Meghan's charitable efforts was a single explosive paragraph. Sources close to Meghan confirm she has extended a private apology to Princess Kate and hopes the two can reconnect privately, as mothers and women, not just royal figures. Boom. No confirmation. No quotes. Just sources close to Meghan. But to William, it was all he needed. The moment that line went public, everything became clear. The letter was never about reconciliation. It was about reputation. And Meghan had just scored a point, without Kate saying a single word. Now, you might wonder, why would that one sentence provoke such fury? Because it trapped them. If the palace denied it, they look cold, hostile, petty. If they confirmed it, Meghan wins. It painted her as the bigger person, the woman who reached out, the woman who apologized, and the woman who, once again, had taken control of the narrative. For William, it wasn't just manipulative. It was insidious. And the worst part? He couldn't prove it. There were no fingerprints. Just whispers, sources, media fire. And he was burning. That night, inside the walls of Adelaide Cottage, the future king erupted. Aides described the scene as unprecedented. Doors slammed. A glass shattered. Voices raised. One senior staffer was reportedly dismissed on the spot, not because they leaked, but because they failed to see it coming. William, always protective of his family, had reached a breaking point. He'd tried restraint. He'd tried silence. He'd tried letting time bury the drama. But now, he realized something devastating. Meghan wasn't returning to the royal family. She was rewriting her exit from it, in real time. And the monarchy was letting her. The next morning, William convened a private meeting. No Charles. No palace press team. Just 3 trusted aides, his war room, as one insider called it. And for the first time, he gave a directive that chilled those in the room. I want every contact tracked. I want names, emails, calls. Anyone even loosely linked to that leak, identify them. This wasn't PR management. This was containment. Because William knew what was coming next. If Meghan had made contact with Kate and leaked it, she wouldn't stop there. There would be more letters, more gestures, more stories, and eventually, public forgiveness. Not from the royals, from the public. And if the public forgave her, despite all the drama, betrayal, and chaos, then Meghan wouldn't need royal permission to return. She'd be welcomed back by the people. The monarchy's worst nightmare. Here's what few understand about William. He's not impulsive. He's calculating. Everything he does, every speech, every smile, every appearance, is calibrated. So when he reacts emotionally, it's rare and serious. This time, he wasn't just furious at Meghan. He was furious at his father. Because Charles, despite knowing about Meghan's letter to Kate, had stayed silent. And worse, he'd reportedly told aides, let's wait and see where this goes. To William, that wasn't patience. That was weakness. And weakness gets exploited. According to insiders, William's relationship with Charles grew icy in the days that followed. Their calls were brief. Their meetings, cold. William allegedly told his father, this isn't just about her. It's about the crown. And you're giving her room to destroy it. Charles, ever the pragmatist, didn't raise his voice. He simply reminded William, "Optics, my dear boy, can change. The institution must survive them." To which William reportedly replied, "What if the institution is the optics?" And with that, he left, slamming the door so hard, the walls shook. Behind the scenes, William was already preparing his next move, one he hadn't used since Megxit, a full royal media counteroffensive, not overt, not cruel, but targeted. He would appear with Kate at key engagements, smiling, radiant, united. He'd remind the public what royal duty looks like. No interviews, no leaks, just stability. But there was one problem. A new leak was coming, and this time, it wouldn't be from Meghan. It would come from someone deep inside the palace. And what they revealed would flip the story upside down and paint William in a way the public had never seen him before. Was Meghan Markle playing the long game all along? That's the question that echoed across British tabloids, royal insider circles, and even among palace staffers the moment the first draft of an alleged private strategy document surfaced. A document rumored to outline not just Meghan's next media move, not just her PR rehabilitation, but a calculated 10-year roadmap, a full, deliberate master plan, crafted from the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight, to position herself not only as a global figure, but as a central one in the monarchy itself, and at the heart of it, a terrifying possibility, not to become queen by name, but queen by influence. The power behind the curtain, the public conscience of the crown, and according to insiders, it's already well underway. Let's start with what first leaked. A source close to a former staffer, once embedded in the Sussex inner circle, spoke off-record to a well-known royal commentator. What she said was brief, but brutal. Meghan had always thought 10 steps ahead. Every speech, every scandal, every headline, it was all chess. People thought she was erratic. She wasn't. She was precise. She then hinted at a document, a private manifesto of sorts. Not a diary, not a memoir, a framework. One Meghan reportedly began drafting after her marriage, but refined in the aftermath of Megxit. It was called, unofficially, the return strategy. At first, people laughed it off. Another conspiracy, another dramatic media ploy, until bits and pieces began surfacing through people who used to be close. Some were texts, others, typed notes with tracked edits. One insider even claimed Meghan had commissioned a digital mood board, a collection of themes, images, and core messages for future use. But what truly shocked those who saw it wasn't the ambition. It was the detail. Because Meghan hadn't just fantasized about re-entering the royal fold. She'd mapped it, step by step, move by move, year by year. Phase 1. The break, 2019 to 2020. Separate from the royal family physically and financially. Reclaim narrative through personal interviews and strategic press. Highlight emotional and racial injustices. Frame departure not as rebellion, but as necessary survival. This phase, executed with precision. Oprah, the Netflix docuseries. Archetypes, each one designed to tell her version of the story before the palace could. Phase 2. The distance, 2021 to 2023. Allow the family to falter publicly. Let palace scandals, illnesses, and internal leaks unfold organically. Maintain silence. Appear dignified. Use charity and motherhood as emotional anchors. Test public forgiveness via U.S. media and charity optics. This is the phase where Meghan disappeared, where she stepped back from the spotlight, just enough to appear gracious, humbled, changed, where she rebranded quietly, where she listened. While the monarchy fumbled through a new king, a divided public, and a disoriented Harry. Phase 3. The realignment, 2024 to 2026. Reopen select royal contacts, beginning with Eugenie. Deliver personal apologies, not public ones. Send targeted messages to Charles and Catherine. Coordinate with UK charities to signal presence. Gain positive press in both Britain and Commonwealth nations. Publicly do nothing, while privately, the groundwork is laid. This is where we are now. And it's working. Meghan has softened her image, won back neutral voices, turned enemies into questioners, planted the seeds of possibility. And behind the scenes, she's opening new channels. One's not dependent on Harry. One's independent of the Montecito brand. Because the ultimate goal isn't to be invited back. It's to be needed. Phase 4. The pivot, 2026 to 2028. Launch a foundation aligned with royal values, but global in scope. Partner with Commonwealth nations, especially those frustrated with royal silence. Become a spokesperson for modern monarchy ideals, diversity, equity, women's rights, climate justice. Appear as a modern royal, even without royal permission. Exploit palace missteps to highlight contrast in tone and values. This is when Meghan stops waiting. This is when she steps into the power void many believe Charles and William will create by sticking to rigid traditions. She becomes what they're not: approachable, empathetic, progressive, royal in form, not function. And the public won't care about titles. They'll care about impact. Phase 5. The reintegration, 2028 to 2030. Accept a formal role, if offered, but on her terms. Refuse to bow. Refuse to conform. Appear as a reconciler. Not there to change the monarchy, but to help it grow. Launch joint initiatives with younger royals, Beatrice, Eugenie, etc. Focus attention on Archie and Lilibet, positioning them as hopeful heirs for a new age. This is the endgame. Not Meghan as queen, but Meghan as kingmaker. She doesn't need the crown. She needs the crowd, the public. And by this phase, if the plan holds, the public will already be with her. You might think this sounds far-fetched, but here's what makes it terrifyingly plausible. The monarchy is already on shaky ground. Younger generations are growing apathetic, or worse, hostile, to traditional royals. Many see them as relics. Meghan, on the other hand, she's modern, biracial, feminist, global, connected to Hollywood, philanthropy, media, and youth culture. She represents what the monarchy can't be without her, and some believe Charles knows it. Some believe that's why he didn't shut the door. Because if William ever falters, if Kate ever becomes too private, if public interest in traditional royalty fades, Meghan may be the last option to keep the brand alive. When William learned about the leaked fragments of the plan, he went ballistic. According to a close aide, he dismissed 3 staffers that week. Not for disloyalty, but for incompetence. He reportedly said, "This was happening under our noses for years, and no one saw it." He wasn't angry that Meghan had a plan. He was angry that it might work. And worse, he now suspected she'd had help. Inside the palace, inside the charities, inside the media, which meant the plan wasn't just hers anymore. It was networked. And that kind of campaign doesn't just threaten family. It threatens the entire foundation of monarchy. Because if influence replaces birthright, what's left of the royal order? But Meghan wasn't done. Because a plan like that doesn't end with leaked notes. It ends with a move. And the move she made next wasn't subtle. It wasn't a whisper. It was a declaration. One that involved a major British institution, a royal event, and an empty seat. One that had always been William's to fill. Until Meghan showed up instead. And what she said in that room, on British soil, would change everything. What if the most underestimated royal was the most important one? That's the question Prince William reportedly asked behind closed doors when the pieces finally started lining up. Because once he looked past the headlines, past the noise, past the obvious players, one name kept resurfacing in every quiet corner of Meghan Markle's alleged return strategy. Princess Eugenie. Not a future queen. Not a working senior royal. Not someone the tabloids chase daily. Which is exactly why she mattered. And exactly why no one saw it coming. At first glance, Eugenie seems harmless in royal terms. Soft-spoken, fashion-forward, often sidelined in the hierarchy. A spare to the spare generation. Someone the palace never considered a threat. But here's the thing about underestimating people in royal history. It's usually a mistake. Because while Eugenie doesn't hold power on paper, she holds something far more dangerous inside the monarchy. Access without scrutiny. She moves freely. She attends private family gatherings. She has direct relationships with cousins, uncles, aides, and staff who would never speak openly to the press, but might talk casually over dinner. And crucially, she was one of the very few royals who never fully cut Meghan off, even when bridges burned, even when the Oprah interview detonated like a bomb, even when Harry's book scorched what was left. Eugenie stayed, quietly, politely, consistently, and that loyalty, intentional or not, may have made her the single most valuable asset in Meghan's entire long game. Let's rewind. When Meghan and Harry first left the UK, the family split into camps. Those who closed ranks around the institution